Joining us now, Republican Congressman from the great state of Pennsylvania, Guy Reschenthaler, an Iraq war veteran and member of the House Judiciary and Foreign Affairs Committees. Congressman, good to talk to you.
John, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So we just heard House Speaker Nancy Pelosi there saying the president can't be acquitted without a trial, which in her eyes means more testimony. Look, Republicans are optimistic. They think they've got the votes to wrap this thing up, and they expect Chief Justice Roberts not to insert himself in the middle of the fight. If there's a tie even on witnesses, the Chief Justice can just say, hey, look, I'm not going to vote on this. I'm not going to make a decision on this, in which case the motion won't have a majority to carry. What are your thoughts on all this, Congressman?
I would assume that that's how it would play out, but I find it interesting that Nancy Pelosi and the other Democrats are muddling this process. So when I was on the Judiciary Committee, I'm still on the Judiciary Committee, but when impeachment was going through the House Judiciary Committee, a lot of the Democrats were trying to position themselves as constitutional experts. Well, I guess they didn't read the part in the Constitution that says that the House has the sole responsibility to impeach the president, really to investigate, call witnesses, etc. And the Senate has the sole ability to try and hear the case. So the fact that they're muddling this, if they wanted all these witnesses, why didn't they call the witnesses when impeachment was going through the House? That would have been the proper time to do it. And if the evidence was so overwhelming, like they led us to believe and like they told the American people, then why now do they want to call more witnesses?
Yeah, I mean, Senator Cory Gardner said he's heard 17 witnesses. One more isn't going to make a difference, no matter who that is. But earlier today, Minority Leader over in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, he took a shot at Trump's defense team, specifically Alan Dershowitz, a Newsmax contributor and Harvard law professor emeritus. Let's listen to Schumer on Dershowitz.
By Dershowitz logic, President Nixon did nothing wrong in Watergate. He was just breaking into the DNC to help his reelection, which of course is in the public interest, according to Dershowitzian logic. The Dershowitz argument, frankly, would unleash a monster. More aptly, it would unleash a monarch.
But Professor Dershowitz fired back, responding on Twitter, quote, further distorting my argument, Senator Schumer and others are now saying that under my argument, Nixon was not impeachable. Of course he was. He committed numerous crimes: obstruction of justice, witness tampering, destruction of evidence, and suborning perjury, and more. A good motive does not justify criminal behavior, but a mixed motive should not turn perfectly legal conduct into an impeachable crime, as the manager's theory would. Please answer my argument, not Schumer's distortion of it. And of course, Congressman, what Professor Dershowitz is saying is that it's impossible to ever get inside someone's head. So if any politician, the President of the United States, Mitch McConnell, Chuck Schumer, you yourself, if 1% of your decision-making process might go to your reelection, I tend to agree with Alan Dershowitz. That's probably the way every politician has decided something at one point or another. If we're going to impeach on that, then everybody would be subject to impeachment or removal.
Well, John, you're absolutely right. And so much of this case has been built on presumptions, assumptions, on the feelings and the speculation of bureaucrats. I think that what we need to remember is that the Democrats, especially the far left radical Democrats, are muddling this entire argument. They're ever changing the case. If you go back to the articles of impeachment, you have abuse of power, which was the old quid pro quo or the bribery, and you have obstruction of Congress. Well, for both of those, you need to have a crime, and crimes need what we lawyers call a prima facie case, meaning there has to be evidence to meet the elements of the crimes that are alleged. There's no crime here that's been committed. There's no facts to back up that there was a quid pro quo or there was an obstruction of Congress. So the Democrats have a very weak and flimsy case. It's falling apart in the Senate, as I predicted it would, and most House Republicans predicted it would. And now it's up for the American people to look at this and decide this in the election in 2020. And I can tell you, by looking at the polls, particularly in the swing states, particularly in the districts that Trump won, that Democrats hold for congressional seats, the poll numbers are going our way. The American people, especially moderates and swing voters, are fed up. They want us to actually do work for the American people, not chase this sham impeachment.
You know, the last Trump rally the other night in Wildwood, New Jersey, Congressman, 26.3% of the crowd, according to campaign manager Brad Parscale's metrics, were Democrats. And I think a lot of them were from some blue-collar, hardworking areas in your state of Pennsylvania. I'd be nervous if I was a Democrat, but more importantly, I think most Americans, the normal American who gets up and goes to work, who doesn't do what you or I do, we have to pay attention to this. They look at this, they look at what kicked this off, and they say, wait a second, the President of the United States is being impeached because he didn't just hand over $400 million of our money to a country with a history of corruption. Isn't that what the president is supposed to do? Ensure taxpayer dollars are being spent wisely? Isn't that his fiduciary responsibility?
Right, and John, if you think about it, what's so ironic here is that President Trump ended up sending aid to Ukraine, and he sent lethal aid. President Obama sent blankets and well wishes. President Trump sent Javelin missiles. And no investigation of Joe or Hunter Biden ever took place. So again, it's impossible to have a quid pro quo when there was no investigation and lethal aid was released to Ukraine. And when you talk about the obstruction of Congress, you can't have obstruction of Congress when those subpoenas weren't fought out in courts. When there's a disagreement between the branches of government, the courts are the ones that settle it. That's what our framers called checks and balances. The Democrats are calling it obstruction of Congress. There's simply no crime here.
No, I tend to agree with you, Congressman. So now let's talk about a Politico story. They're reporting on this legal battle over John Bolton's new book. Now we've got this new video of John Bolton. So when John Bolton was working for President Trump, the call with Zelensky, Ukrainian president, was warm and cordial, quote unquote. Now it's, well, maybe inappropriate. But NSC lawyers, they're trying to determine what Bolton can reveal from his time at the White House, saying that some elements of the manuscript contain, quote, significant amounts of classified intel. How do you expect this is going to end with Bolton's book? Do we see all of it? Do we see some of it? Or will the NSC block it?
You know, I really can't speculate as to what's going to be released from John Bolton's book. Of course, if there's classified information, that should not be released if it's still classified at this period of time. But there's so much to do about John Bolton. And what's a shame is it's a distraction from the actual case. John Bolton is talking about the phone call between President Trump and President Zelensky. Well, why do we need to know John Bolton's thoughts and feelings on this? Why do we need to know the other bureaucrats' thoughts and feelings on this phone call? We have the transcript. President Trump released the transcript of the actual phone call. We have it. It's the primary source document of this controversy.
Congressman, before I let you go, I want to switch gears. I want to talk about a situation in Russia. Now, President Trump's newly confirmed ambassador to Russia, John Sullivan, is meeting with former Marine Paul Whelan. He's been imprisoned in Moscow for the last 13 months, accused of being a spy. Again, he's a former United States Marine. I mean, this is really, really difficult stuff for this guy and his family. Around last year, our very own John Bachman sat down with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and asked him about the Whelan case. Listen to this.
American people should know that the safety and security of Americans traveling abroad is of the utmost importance to us here at the State Department and throughout the United States government. We're doing everything we can to make sure that he's treated appropriately and that we get the information we need.
So, Congressman, we are not seeing anything official from the State Department. We actually, here at Newsmax, put an inquiry out to them about the Whelan case. Haven't heard back yet. Have you or your fellow representatives heard anything about the Whelan case? Any update, any information on a potential release?
So I'm on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and I can tell you this, that if there is an administration that is going to bring this Marine home, this American citizen home, it is the Trump administration. And if there is an individual that's capable and willing to do this, it's Mike Pompeo. So I have the full trust, and the President and Mike Pompeo have my full support in this. But what I want to know when it comes to this Marine being held overseas is, where's the evidence? And why is this Marine, this American citizen, being held without having the charges brought forward, hearing the evidence? Why is he being kept in isolation from what we're understanding? There's a lot of questions there. He should be afforded due process, even if he is in Russia. And we got to get to the bottom of this. And if the Russians do have facts and evidence, present it. But right now, they've handed over nothing in terms of evidence to show that this Marine was doing anything other than going to a friend's wedding in Moscow.
Congressman Guy Reschenthaler, thanks so much for your time tonight.